Welcome to LFPL's At the Library series, an ongoing podcast featuring author talks, programs, and events at the Louisville Free Public Library. For more information about upcoming events, visit us online at www.lfpl.org/upcoming events.
Margaret Peterson Haddix grew up on a farm in Ohio. As a kid, she knew two girls who had the exact same first, middle, and last names and shared a birthday, only 1 year apart, and she always thought that was bizarre. As an adult, Haddix worked as a newspaper reporter and copy editor in Indiana before her first book, Running Out of Time, was published. She has since written more than 40 books for kids and teens, including the Greystone Secret series, Shadow Children series, the Missing series, the Children of Exile series, and lots of standalones. Haddix and her husband Doug now live in Columbus, Ohio, where they raised their two kids. You can learn more about her at haddixbooks.com. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and please join me in welcoming Margaret Peterson Haddix.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to the library and also to Carmichael's for inviting me here. I am Margaret Peterson Haddix, and I am out talking about my very newest book, which is The Stolen Key, the third book in the Mysteries of Trash and Treasure series. But because I have written lots and lots and lots of other books, some of you might have questions about one of the other books that I've written. And so I just wanted to let you know that that is going to be fine when we get to question and answer time. I'm happy to answer questions about any of my books. Because she had that little bit in there about the two girls who have the same names, I thought I would at least touch on some of my other books. That is a reference to this particular series, the Greystone Secret series. And in the Greystone Secret series, it is about these three kids named Rochester, Emma, and Finn, who find out that three other kids with the exact same names, middle names, birthdays even, and ages have just been kidnapped. And they're kind of like, does this have anything to do with us? And it does. So I'm just going to leave that with the Greystone Secret series. This is my newest standalone book, and it is called The School for Whatnot, and it is about two kids who have been best friends ever since kindergarten. And then at the very end of fifth grade, when the one kid is thinking, oh, we'll go on to the middle school, we'll stay best friends forever, the other kid kind of reveals that they may never be allowed to see each other ever again. So that is School for Whatnots. And then I did something very bizarre a year or two ago, because my very first book, which is called Running Out of Time, came out in 1995. And I had a lot of kids and adults as well who told me they wanted a sequel, and I kept saying, I don't know how to do that, I can't figure what a sequel would be, and I just can't do it. And then last year I did have a sequel come out, 28 years after the first book, which is not a very typical thing, but Falling Out of Time is about a girl named Zola, who thinks that she is growing up in just the perfect place. She thinks she has the perfect life in the year 2193, obviously very far into the future from us now. And then she discovers that pretty much everything she thought she knew was wrong. So that is Falling Out of Time. And now I'm up to the Mysteries of Trash and Treasure series, and I will spend a lot more time on these books because this is the newest series. Has anybody read The Secret Letters already? Okay, back in the back. I was not going to insult your intelligence if all of you are like, yeah, I already read it, so don't tell us about it, get to the new one. So that's fine that you haven't read it, because now I can tell you about it. To really put yourself in the right mindset to think about The Secret Letters, I would like you to think of 4 of the most dreaded words that an adult can say to a kid. And of course, what I am talking about is, go clean your room. Yes. So there are only 2 kids in the audience, but I will ask you guys, do you hate it when you're told to go clean your room? Or are you like really neat and tidy and you love it? Hate or love? They're kind of shaking their heads like, No, they don't like it. Okay. They're very polite, though. They're not going to speak up and say, oh, it's terrible. So it's even worse than that for Colin and Nevaeh, who are the two main characters throughout this whole series, because they don't just have to clean their own room, they have to deal with other people's messes. And that is because they each have a parent who works in junk removal. In Colin's case, his mother, her company is called Possession Curation. And she is all about getting rid of stuff that you really don't need, stuff that's broken, that's old, and then you can savor and enjoy the things that you have, that you really find meaningful. In Nevaeh's case, her father is what he calls the Junk King. And he is all about collecting junk and then reselling it to somebody else. So they have very different strategies. They're actually enemies, Colin's mom and Nevaeh's dad. But there is one thing they both agree on, and that is that both of them think that once a kid is 12 years old, that is old enough to work in the family business. So it is the summer after both Colin and Nevaeh have turned 12. And so while their friends are out having just a great summer, going on vacation, swimming a lot, maybe just playing video games a lot, Colin and Nevaeh are stuck dealing with junk. And for Colin, it gets even worse, like right from the start. It's the very first week on the job. He is up in this really hot attic that's like 10 billion degrees because there's no air conditioning. And his mother has said to him, everything in this attic is garbage and you just need to throw it away. And it is packed to the rafters. It's also all so old and nasty that he will grab a handful of stuff and it just falls apart in his hands. So he is covered in sweat and dirt and mouse droppings and cobwebs, and he is just miserable. And then he's walking across the floorboards, ready to get another box full of stuff that's going to fall apart in his arms. And he takes a step, and his foot goes straight through the floorboard. And then it's stuck. He can't get his foot back out. So he reaches down, and he grabs his ankle, and he pulls up as hard as he can. And he does get his ankle out and his foot out. They're attached, obviously. I don't know why I said it that way. But he gets that out. But when he reached down under the floorboard, his hand brushed against something. And he's like, oh, what was that? So he gets out his cell phone, turns on the flashlight app, sticks it down into the hole, and he discovers that there's a shoebox hidden under the floorboard. I mean, he's already up in an attic where people stash all sorts of stuff, but the shoebox is hidden under the floorboard. So he pulls it out, and he discovers that on the top it says, "This belongs to Rosemary. Everybody else keep out." Now, I just so happen to have a shoebox that we'll say is just the replica of the shoebox that's up there. And I was wondering I was going to say one of the kids, but maybe both of you would want to come up and help me open this shoebox. Would you guys like to both do that? Are you coming? Okay, you're going to do it though. Come on up. What is your name? Emma. Oh, that is perfect, Emma. I kind of wondered if your name was Emma because when I was showing the earlier slide, I could see the people around you are like, kind of pointing to you. So, okay. Emma, I was talking about cobwebs and mouse droppings. How do you feel about mice and spiders? Oh, do you need me to assure you that there are no mice and spiders in here? Okay. That makes sense. You want to shake it? Okay. Does it seem like it's heavy enough to have a mouse in it? No. Okay. So we're safe from mice, and I promise you there are no spiders in there. Okay? So okay. Are you brave enough? Are you ready to open this box? She just froze. Okay, do you want to pull that up? What you see down in the bottom there? Okay. Whoops. So, do you want to read that to everybody? Okay. I'm going to advance it so they can see, but you can turn the face of the crowd and you can read it to everybody.
Dear Rosemary, please, 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 don't hit me anymore. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Will you ever talk to me again? Toby.
Oh, very good job. Would you all give a round of applause to Emma? Nice job. I forgot to mention, and maybe this might have motivated, is that your sister back there?
No.
No, okay, not your sister. Okay, I was guessing wrong. So this might have motivated, but there is a prize for being brave enough to come up and do that. So here is your prize. And it is, for those of you who can't see, it is a key that looks like one of those. And you are probably now thinking, Emma, what is this a key to, right? You're curious about that, aren't you? Okay. I promise by the end of this presentation, I will tell you what it's a key to, but I'm not going to do that until the end. So do you want to go sit down, and then I promise I will get to it and explain it eventually, because it's connected to the last book, and I need to finish talking about the first and second book first. But yeah, I think I confused Emma. She had that moment of, wait, what? But okay, she's smiling at me now, so we're good, right? Okay, good. So I did give her the key, and we'll get to that later. But the letter that she read to you does indeed say it's between two kids, Rosemary and Toby, and I only put one letter in the box that I had Emma open, but in the book, there are multiple letters in there, and some of them have dates on them, and Colin realizes that they are letters from 50 years ago that two kids from the 1970s exchanged between one another. And there are several mysteries that he sees in these letters. Like one of them, just from this letter, he's kind of like, well, what did they fight about? Did they ever make up? Where are these kids now? And so he really wants to find this out. He becomes very curious about these kids. He also kind of gets interested in the 1970s and all the weird things that went on back then. And then he realizes that for him to find out the answers to this mystery that he's very curious about, he needs Nevaeh's help, even though her family and his family are pretty much enemies. So that is what happens in the secret letters. In the second book in the series, The Ghostly Photos, by this point, Colin and Nevaeh are feeling very good about their ability to solve mysteries. And so they have started their own business to solve mysteries. And then the very first customer that they get comes in with something very puzzling. I'm curious, have any of you ever had to move in your life where you've gone to a new home? Okay, a couple people. You're not willing to admit it, but pretty much everybody, it looks like. Okay, so when you moved, did you find something bizarre that the people who lived there before had maybe left behind? Has anybody ever had that experience? Okay, I see people nodding, so you guys can relate to this. Ree, who becomes Colin and Nevaeh's first customer, she has that experience. She has just moved to a new house. She gets into the house and she discovers some pictures, old pictures that have been left behind, and they're kind of strange. They are also very creepy, and they are like this, and this, and these pictures. There are a lot of pictures that involve coffins and kind of ghostly figures. So she takes those pictures to Nevaeh and Colin, and she puts them down in front of them, and she says, please prove to me that these are not pictures of ghosts, and please prove to me that the house that I have just moved into isn't haunted. And the house that she has just moved into, it's a funeral home where there are dead bodies pretty much every night. So So they have a lot that they have to deal with in the ghostly photos. And then as they're trying to figure out how to prove that to Ree, they realize that there are some mysteries connected to Ree as well, that she's keeping some secrets from them. So that is Ghostly Photos. And finally, I am up to the newest book, The Stolen Key. And because it's the newest one, I'm going to kind of back up a little bit and give you kind of some background about how I got some ideas for this particular book. A couple years ago, I just walked out my front door one morning and stepped down from my front porch onto the sidewalk, and then we have flower beds on either side of our sidewalk, and I just happened to look down at one of those flower beds, and there was something there that had not been there the night before. There was a key right there in the flower bed. And I knew it was not a key that belonged to me or my husband or anybody else in our family. We had not had company come and visit us the night before that maybe had dropped a key as they were leaving. There's no reason that anybody else would have walked up our front step to our front step and dropped that key. So I was really baffled about where that key had come from. And Emma, when you're holding a key that you don't know what it goes to, it's really puzzling, isn't it? Yeah, she's agreeing with me. So that's just how it works. And I got a little fixated on trying to figure out where this key came from and what it went to. I have now talked about this key in 4 different cities to lots of different school kids. And I actually think a kid suggested the best solution to it, that she said she thought it was dropped by a bird, that maybe a crow that liked shiny objects had carried it off. And that's about the best explanation I've heard. But up until this week, I had been thinking for 3 years, where did that key come from? And so it started me thinking about keys in general. I was getting a little obsessed with keys. And then, just kind of coincidentally, about the same time, my husband and I took a weekend getaway to Pittsburgh. And maybe some of you know this. I didn't know this ahead of time, but Pittsburgh has one of those bridges where people have left locks on the bridge. If you have been to Paris, Paris is like that too. I mean, a little bit more dramatic in Paris, but Pittsburgh has this as well. And civil engineers really hate this type of tradition because if you put enough locks on a bridge, you can kind of destroy the structural integrity of the bridge. But I wasn't thinking like a civil engineer when I saw this. I was thinking like a writer, because that is what I am. And I looked at those and I was like, every single lock up there represents a story. And mostly they're probably romantic stories. That I think the most general reason that people would put a lock on a bridge is it's a couple that they're in love, and then they're like, we'll put this up there, and then, our love will last forever, and that lock will be on that bridge forever. But I was thinking about all the stories that were involved there, and I was kind of fascinated with the bridge. And then I noticed that one of the locks on the bridge had the name Nevaeh on it, the same name of one of my characters. And I was like, oh, that's a sign. I need to put something like this in this book. And so in The Stolen Key, there's kind of a trail of keys and locks. And it starts out kind of similar to what happened to me, that Colin walks out on his front porch. He does not find a key dropped by a bird. That does not happen in the book. But he finds a box on his doorstep. And it wasn't a case where there was some online order that was made and there was a box. That's kind of undramatic. In this case, it was a box. It was in brown wrapping paper. It had his name and address on it, but no return address. And there was no stamp from FedEx or UPS or Amazon or anything like that. So he picks up the box and he unwraps the brown wrapping paper, and he discovers that there's a Post-it note on the box inside. And it says, your father wanted you to have this. Colin does not remember ever meeting his father. He's just found out recently that his father has just died. And every time he asks his mother about his father, her answer is, well, he was really not a very good person. So let's just not talk about him. So of course, Colin has to open this box and find out what's inside. And then there's kind of a trail of items that lead him to solving the mystery of who his father is and exactly why his mother says he's such a bad person. So that is what happens in The Stolen Key. And so with kids a lot, when I've been talking at schools, I've been mentioning that that whole image of using keys to think about writing stories, it also relates to writing stories for anybody else. That if any of you are writers yourself or aspiring writers, there are the keys to writing, or kind of combining, or the way I view it, is to combine your own experiences, your imagination, research, and then kind of using the grounding of everything you've read and written, and then that leads to stories that you can write yourself. Now, I am back to Emma, who's sitting here very patiently holding that key. And so I have, I thought about hiding this somewhere in this room, but I decided that was too complicated. So I have kind of a present for you that includes the lock, but then everything the lock is attached to, you also get. So this is a treasure box. Hopefully you don't think it's a trash box. So this is a treasure box that has a lock. And hopefully that key will open the lock. So congratulations, Emma. And right away she's like, okay, I'm going to open this. Not going to listen to anything else, just going to listen. Just going to do that. So that's, and I made her wait until the very end, not because I was mean, but because I wanted to talk about keys and locks there. If you have, I'm going to open it to questions in a minute, and if you have questions that I don't have a chance to answer, or you think of later, or you read one of my books and then you have a question, on my website, I do have answers to frequently asked questions about almost every single one of my books. If any of you are educators or librarians and you want to do some sort of a book club or book group discussion, I also have a lot of discussion guides for my books, so a lot of resources available there, and then those are the other places to find me online. And now I am giving you the picture of all the books again and opening it to your questions, so you can ask whatever you would like to know. Okay, somebody has to be the first one. Yes?
So you've written for a long time.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about how you've evolved as a writer?
Yeah.
Your books from long ago and think, oh, I would have done that differently, or?
Yeah, it was very interesting when I wrote Falling Out of Time, 27, 28 years after I had written Running Out of Time. I had to go back and reread Running Out of Time to kind of, to make sure I was being consistent in terms of how I related to it. But I was also, I kind of dreaded doing that because Running Out of Time was my first book, and hopefully I have learned something since then. And so I was kind of like, well, what if I read it and then I'm embarrassed that it even exists out there in the world, that I think it's that terrible. And there were certainly, anytime you go back and read your own writing, you can think of things that you would like to improve. But there were also times that I was like, wow, I was really efficient with words back then. And I think I've gotten wordier over the years. And part of it is when I wrote Running Out of Time, I had been a newspaper reporter for 4 or 5 years before I started writing Running Out of Time. And I was very much in that mode of, gotta keep the information brief, keep it really short. So I was pretty efficient about providing the information. And now I would like to think that my stories are deeper and richer. I'll put it that way, so that it's not a negative that I'm wordier. Yeah.
So I read Running Out of Time shortly after it came out in school. I really liked it.
Good.
I guess what was your inspiration, or why did you finally write the sequel?
Oh, what gave me the idea?
What triggered it?
That triggered the sequel rather than that. Okay. So for years, when people would say that they thought that I should write a sequel, I always felt like I could have written something that was maybe interesting, but I couldn't figure out a way to make it the same kind of an adventure and the same level of danger that Jessie faces in Running Out of Time. that everything I thought of for a sequel, it was more just kind of human interest-ish, not really adventurous. And I thought it needed to be equal in terms of the adventure. And then it was actually talking to kids at schools, kind of having conversations with them, and some of the questions that they ask that made me start thinking about, oh, there would be a different way to do this that would be an adventure. And it's I don't think this is giving away too much about Falling Out of Time, but it's kind of a next generation type story. And so it kind of was good that I waited 27 years to work on the sequel, because by then there was time for another generation to come up. So it worked out to do it that way, but partly it was just that I didn't feel that I had an idea that was good enough to be the sequel. And I have this thing about, I resisted writing any series books for a long time anyhow, because I'm sure we can all think of books or movies that the first one was really good, and then the next one wasn't so good, and it kind of ruined how you felt about the first one. And the example I'm thinking of, I'll pick on a movie. I never pick on another author's books, but I'll pick on a movie. When Back to the Future came out, and I loved that movie, and then the second movie, I hope none of you have seen it, because it really is not good.
Well, I like Falling Out of Time.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Yes?
You talked about like serendipity, and I guess part of it is, you mentioned like being a newspaper reporter, like you're probably constantly writing notes.
Yes.
How do you keep track of like when you come across a lot and you're like, you're focused on this one book that you're writing, and now you see something that it might not fit into this book. Like, how do you keep track of like notes and stuff?
Yeah. Usually there is a temptation to be like the very easily distracted squirrel, and there's also this thing of whatever you're working on, it's even if you're really excited about the idea initially, at a certain point you're working on it. It is work at a certain point. That it's fun, but it's also work at a certain point to get it to beginning, middle, end, and have everything in there that you want to, and revising and making it as good as possible. There's work involved in that. And that new idea is always shiny, and when you're stuck on something in one book and then you look at something new, it's kind of like, oh, I'm sure that would be much easier to write. So there's always that temptation. But kind of how I deal with it is that I have a writer's notebook that I always write the ideas down usually write them down when they come to me, and tell myself, you're not going to forget this idea. If it's a really good idea, it maybe is developing in the back of my mind, even if I'm writing something else. And it's kind of like in the back of my mind, there's a new toy that I promise I can play with after I'm done writing the book that I'm working on at that point. So it's also helpful to me that generally I'm writing books under a contract, and so they don't pay me for half a book. I have to finish it and turn it in and have to have it be good enough that they think it will be worth publishing before they will pay me. So that's incentive as well. Yeah. Yes?
I'm a school librarian, and when I came into my library, the 39 Clues books, I wasn't familiar with them, and then I was very fascinated by the fact that they're all by different authors. How did that kind of come?
So if you were one of those school librarians who it's really frustrating that it's all by different authors, and it's like, okay, for book 1, you have to go over to the R's for Rick Riordan, and book 2, go to the K's for Gordon Corman, unless you have the series. You've got the series all together. Good for you. Good for you. It's funny, when that series first came out, like I had conversations with school librarians who they were really struggling with it. So, yeah, and that was kind of before the genreification whole trend anyhow. So anyhow, Scholastic came up with the idea of the series in the first place. And then they really got lucky and timed it very well, because it was right before Rick Riordan had taken off as, like, I think The Lightning Thief was out, and people knew it was going to be popular. but it wasn't yet like a huge success. So they arranged with Rick Riordan to write the first book in the series. And they also kind of hired him to do brief summaries of the next 9 books. And then they were like, we're going to hire different authors to do the other 9 books, kind of with the idea that if you have multiple authors, the books can come out really fast. And so kids don't, they read the first book and then they wait 10 years and they're not still waiting for that last book because they're grown up. So it was in many ways kind of an ingenious concept. It could have gone really badly if we had all tried to fight over how things would be. So the editor who was in charge of it, she did a really good job of kind of being like a traffic cop of, okay, this is your idea, and so this is how this is going to go. She was kind of the arbiter of how things were done. And I was a little bit concerned when they approached me to see if I would do it. I was a little bit concerned that they would want it written in a certain way. And they said, no. We want to be introducing kids to lots of different writers. And so we want you to write in your usual style, but you use these characters that need to be consistent throughout the whole series. So they did a really good job of monitoring that. Something that made it complicated was that because the books were coming out so fast, I had to write the 10th book before the 7th, 8th, or 9th books were finished. And so I had like an outline of what those books were going to be, but things change when you write them. So that was a little bit hard. Linda Sue Park was the author who did the 9th book, and so she was writing pretty much the same time as me, and so we ended up conferring quite a bit. And we were really lucky because a lot of things that we knew had to be resolved by the end of the 10th book. Some of them, she would say to me, are you going to do this or do you want me to do this? And whatever I said, it worked out very well because there were certain things that I was like, I don't want to deal with that. And she was like, oh, good. I wanted to write about that. And then there were some things that she didn't want to deal with that I was like, oh, good. I want that for my book. And I don't know what we would have done. Well, I do know what we would have done if we'd argued about it. We would have had to go to the editor and been like little kids going, Mommy, I want it my way. Any other questions? Yes?
Have you ever thought about writing different format, like a picture book or graphic novel?
Yeah. When my kids are now grown up, but when my kids were at that picture book age, kind of coincidentally, my editor and agent said to me, would you like to write some picture books? There would be a great market for your picture books. And so I wrote, I think 3 and sent them in. And my agent offered them to the editor that I was working with at that point, and then he didn't want them. And then she offered them more widely, and including some other editors who had purposely said, would Margaret write picture books? And everybody rejected them. And their reasoning, this was really fascinating to me, their reasoning was, these books are not edgy enough. We want edgy picture books. And I was kind of like, I don't want to be an edgy picture book writer. So it was fine. My kids got to the point that they were reading the age level books that I had, so it all worked out. But it was kind of funny that they had specifically said, we want you to write picture books, and then they're like, okay, no, not those picture books. And as far as a graphic novel, years ago, kind of before the whole graphic novel trend was such a big thing, I was approached about turning the Shadow Children series into a graphic novel series. And I was in that phase of, well, I'd like to hear more about it before I made any decisions about it. And then nothing came of it. And it wasn't that anybody rejected anything, it just kind of petered out a little bit. And now I think I would consider it a lot more seriously, because there has been kind of a trend of a lot of people going back and doing graphic novels based on books that have already been done. I actually just turned in a manuscript to my agent that I'm not exactly sure what it is, and that may be a huge problem, because she may say, I don't know what this is either, and because of that it's not publishable, but it's something that it's not a picture book, and it's not really a graphic novel. It's kind of maybe could be a hybrid type thing, and with a lot of illustrations, but not exactly in a graphic novel way. And so we'll see. So maybe that will work out in that type of way. Do you have any questions, Emma? You were kind of smiling at me. Have you managed to open the box?
I already did.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Well, if nobody has any other questions, thank you very much for coming. I would be happy to. I guess I'm over there signing books. So, thank you. Thanks.